Everyone tells you to be more sociable, smile more, talk more, fit in. But here's the brutal truth. The more sociable you are, the more stupid you become. Not because your brain stops working, but because your mind stops being your own. You start thinking like the group. You laugh at what they laugh at. You agree just to avoid tension, and little by little, your sharpness dies. This video exposes the hidden cost of constant sociability, how it weakens your judgment, dilutes your identity, and makes you easy to control. With Machiavelli's cunning and Stoicism's discipline, we'll show you why solitude sharpens the mind, why detachment is power, and why needing approval is the beginning of your downfall. If you've ever felt like you're losing yourself just to keep others comfortable, you are. Hit like, subscribe, and let's reclaim your mental sovereignty, because in a world that rewards the agreeable, clarity is rebellion.
Number 1.
The trap of sociability. There is a quiet danger in being too liked. It creeps in slowly, through compliments, handshakes, easy conversations. At first, it feels like connection, but if you're not careful, it becomes addiction. You start adjusting your words to avoid friction. You laugh at things that don't amuse you. You nod when you should question, and in doing so, you trade your judgment for belonging. That is the first step into the trap. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." When you live to be liked, you start curating your image, not to reflect truth, but to attract attention. Eventually, even you forget what you really are. The mask you wear to please others fuses with your face, and what you gain in social ease, you lose in mental clarity. The Stoics issued a more interior warning. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That is the price of truth in a world obsessed with agreement. Growth requires being misunderstood. It demands that you resist the comfort of consensus, but sociability blunts that edge. It makes you hesitate before you speak. It teaches you to silence your insights if they disturb harmony. And in that silence, your mind begins to rust. Let's take a closer look at what happens in group dynamics. The moment you enter a room, your nervous system scans for approval. Your thoughts shape themselves around what others want to hear, and slowly original thinking is replaced with recycled noise. People don't realize this erosion because it's socially rewarded. Smooth talkers get the promotion, agreeable thinkers get the applause. But the most agreeable minds are rarely the sharpest. They're just the safest. This is what Machiavelli would call a strategic failure, because when your thinking is predictable, you become controllable. You've outsourced your judgment to the crowd, and that's not intelligence. That's dependence. Now consider the opposite, a mind that resists this current. Look at James Baldwin. He spoke truths people didn't want to hear. He wrote about race, identity, and power, not to fit in, but to wake people up. He once said, "The paradox of education is precisely this, that as one begins to become conscious, one begins to examine the society in which he is being educated." That's the moment you exit the trap, when you begin to question the very systems teaching you how to behave. Or take Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by sycophants, flattery, and temptation. He still chose to write in solitude. His meditations are a masterclass in self-correction. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. He knew the danger of appearing wise instead of being wise, and that is the difference the sociable man often forgets. And then there's Jiddu Krishnamurti, a philosopher who famously said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." He rejected followers, resisted labels, and refused to become a guru. Why? Because he understood that once you're owned by admiration, you're no longer free. His entire teaching was centered on freedom from conditioning, and sociability in many ways is the most seductive conditioning of all. This doesn't mean you should become a hermit, but it does mean you must protect your mental independence. Learn to be around people without absorbing them. Learn to listen without agreeing, to disagree without arguing, and to detach without withdrawing. That is the Stoic path, not isolation, but self-possession. And that's not easy. You will be called difficult, antisocial, arrogant. Not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer predictable. You've stepped outside the script, and people fear what they can't categorize. But that fear is your proof. You're thinking clearly. You're no longer sedated by social ease. Understand this. When you stop trying to please, you will offend people. But the people you offend by being honest were never your people to begin with. Their discomfort reveals the depth of your integrity, and that discomfort acts as a filter. It clears your environment of the shallow and invites in the few who value truth over harmony. And harmony itself is often a lie. Real harmony doesn't come from agreement. It comes from mutual respect between independent minds. And independence is built in solitude. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's not absence. It's presence. It's the space where your own voice becomes louder than the crowd's. Start practicing it. Begin by noticing the subtle betrayals. When you nod, laugh, or agree just to avoid discomfort, interrupt that impulse. Ask yourself, is this me or is this performance? That moment of self-interrogation is the first spark of sovereignty. Because in the end, this is not about rejecting others. It's about refusing to reject yourself. When you choose clarity over popularity, truth over comfort, and presence over performance, you reclaim your mind. You become sovereign again. You don't just think, you think originally. And in a society addicted to sameness, originality is a form of rebellion. The Stoics believed that philosophy wasn't words. It was a way of living, and Machiavelli believed that survival depended on seeing through illusion. When you blend both, you arrive at something rare. A mind that doesn't fold under pressure, a spirit that doesn't dilute to be digestible, and a presence that doesn't flinch in the face of rejection. That is the power of detachment. That is the trap of sociability broken, and that is where your freedom begins.
Number 2.
The consequence is stupidity. Let's define this clearly. When we speak of stupidity here, we're not referring to lack of intelligence. We're not speaking of people who can't think. We're speaking of those who no longer do, the ones who surrender the responsibility of thought in exchange for comfort. It's not a matter of IQ. It's a matter of independence. And when you give up your intellectual sovereignty, you appear smart but become hollow. This is what Machiavelli warned about, not just for rulers, but for anyone seeking clarity. He knew the moment a person chooses to be liked over being honest, they begin to rot from the inside. He wrote, "Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear." But what he left unsaid is this: those who are driven by the need to be loved will always compromise their thinking, always. The Stoics saw this from another angle. Seneca said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." The man who runs from opinion to opinion, trend to trend, loses the thread of his own mind. He becomes a collector of quotes but has no convictions. He repeats what sounds good, but the question is, does he live by any of it? That's where stupidity begins, not in ignorance, but in mimicry. When the mind no longer challenges, questions, or pauses, when it merely echoes louder voices, it ceases to be sovereign. And what's most tragic is that this kind of stupidity is rewarded in school, in corporate meetings, on social media. The polished, agreeable, presentable performer rises, but beneath the surface, there is no soul, no clarity, no weight. Let's be honest. We see this all the time. People repeat podcast sound bites and think they're thinking. They repost quotes and call it reflection. They know how to sound intelligent, but they don't know how to be intelligent. Because true intelligence requires solitude. It requires discomfort. It requires walking into ideas that unsettle you and staying there long enough to grow. David Foster Wallace warned of this in This Is Water. He said, "The most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about." Why? Because they don't give you social points. They don't fit into tweets. They require real attention, but attention has become rare. And without attention, thought decays. Machiavelli would call this predictability. The person who has no inner world becomes easy to read, easy to manage, easy to push. That's not stupidity by accident. It's stupidity by surrender. Epictetus put it even more brutally. He said, "You are a little soul carrying around a corpse." That's what happens when you stop engaging your reason, when you react without reflection, when your beliefs are chosen for you by your environment, your feed, your friend group. The result is a kind of spiritual deadness. You're moving, but you're not alive. Now look at the alternative. Consider someone like J.K. Rowling. Before the world applauded her, she wrote in isolation. Her story wasn't built to impress. It was built from her private vision. No audience, no applause, just relentless focus. And because it was hers, not borrowed, it resonated deeply. The point isn't fame. The point is originality. And originality comes from thinking alone. That's why detachment is essential. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about truth than about being liked. It's the ability to let go of mental comfort, to stop performing intelligence and start living it. That means reading for depth, not speed, thinking in silence, questioning things even when everyone around you agrees. The real stupidity, it's fear. The fear of standing alone in thought, the fear of being wrong in public, the fear of appearing foolish. So we hide behind phrases that are safe. We nod instead of speak. We quote instead of build. But the Stoics would say, this is cowardice in disguise. Machiavelli saw the same. He knew that the man who follows too closely becomes forgettable, but the man who risks sounding wrong in pursuit of clarity becomes untouchable, because unpredictability is power, and the unpredictable mind cannot be ruled. So what do? Start by slowing down. Notice the moment when you agree just to move on. Interrupt the habit. Ask, do I really believe this? If the answer is no, sit with it. That silence, that tension, that's the start of independent thought. That's your mind waking up. Practice solitude not as retreat, but as training. Let your thoughts simmer. Let discomfort stay long enough to reveal what you've been avoiding. In conversation, speak from what's true, not what's safe. When you feel the urge to please, pause, and when you don't know something, say so, because nothing kills intelligence faster than the need to appear intelligent. Here's the paradox. The more deeply you think, the fewer people will agree with you. But that's not a problem. That's a sign that your mind is finally your own, that you're no longer echoing, but creating, that you're not seeking validation, but truth. The Stoics taught that philosophy was not performance, it was preparation. And Machiavelli taught that those who think clearly are feared precisely because they're rare. The goal isn't to impress others, it's to be unshakable within yourself. That is the antidote to stupidity. Not more data, not more quotes, but more silence, more discomfort, more courage, and above all, more ownership of your mind.
Number 3.
The path to sovereignty. So what is the alternative? If trying to fit in makes you weak and seeking approval dulls your mind, what does real power actually look like? The answer is not dominance. It's not being louder, more liked, or more followed. The answer is sovereignty, not over others, but over yourself. The Stoics called it eudaimonia, a state of inner harmony and disciplined mind. Machiavelli would call it strategic independence. Both point to the same truth. When your mind is your own, you become immovable. This path has 3 pillars: detachment, solitude, and clarity. They are simple, but they are not easy. They require deep work, quiet strength, and radical honesty. Let's begin with detachment. Most people think detachment means not caring. That's wrong. Detachment means caring selectively. It means choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling the Roman Empire, practiced this daily. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Detachment means you no longer beg for peace from the world. You build it from within. And this isn't about withdrawal. You can be present, loving, connected, but still sovereign. You observe emotions without being ruled by them. You show up without performing. You listen without absorbing the chaos around you. That kind of presence is rare and powerful. In a room full of noise, the detached man is quiet, not because he has nothing to say, but because he doesn't waste his breath on proving things. And that restraint, it makes people lean in. It gives your words weight. And in a society of constant reaction, the man who can pause becomes the most unpredictable one in the room. Next is solitude. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's not emptiness. It's where you return to yourself, Seneca said. Retire into yourself as much as you can. Why? Because only in solitude can you hear your real voice, the one not shaped by noise, judgment, or distraction. Most people avoid solitude because it confronts them with everything they're running from. But the sovereign man welcomes it. He sees it not as isolation, but as a forge. Leonardo da Vinci sketched alone. Beethoven composed in silence. J.K. Rowling built entire worlds in quiet cafes. None of them created from the crowd. They went inward first, and from that inward journey, something powerful emerged. The more time you spend alone, honestly, purposefully, the clearer your thinking becomes. You're not filling space, you're sharpening vision. Even in the modern world, the pattern holds. Steve Wozniak created the Apple I computer by working late into the night, alone. He didn't brainstorm in groups, he built in silence. Real breakthroughs don't come from endless interaction. They come from focus, and focus is born in solitude. And finally, clarity. This is the most essential trait of a sovereign mind. Everyone talks, few think clearly. Everyone wants to be right, few want to understand. Clarity means seeing things as they are, not as your emotions wish they were. It means cutting through noise and getting to essence. Epictetus reminded us, it's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Clarity requires stepping back, asking, what is actually happening? What's within my control? What is just noise? These questions create distance, and in that distance, peace grows. The sovereign man doesn't argue to win. He doesn't react to every insult. He moves with intention. When he speaks, it's precise. When he acts, it's deliberate. His energy is not scattered. It's concentrated because he's trained his mind to focus on what matters and let go of the rest. Clarity also demands that you get comfortable with discomfort. Most people chase convenience, but sovereignty requires you to stay in hard truths, to sit in the gap between who you are and who you're meant to be. That's not weakness. That's where transformation happens. But here's what they don't tell you. This path is lonely. When you stop performing, people won't understand you. When you speak less, they'll assume you're distant. When you act differently, they'll call you arrogant. That's the price, but it's a worthy one, because the reward is peace that doesn't depend on approval. Eventually, you'll notice the shift. While others spin in drama, you'll stay grounded. While others need to be seen, you'll stay in the shadows, building. While others seek constant validation, you'll validate yourself through action. That quiet power, that's sovereignty. Machiavelli knew it too. He wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." Sovereign men act from clarity, not pressure. They lead themselves before trying to lead anyone else. They don't wait for permission. They move when it's time. So how do you begin? Start with 10 minutes a day, just silence. No distractions. Sit with yourself, ask, what am I pretending not to know? What emotion am I resisting? What thought keeps repeating? Don't run from it, face it. The answers will sting, but they will free you. Then practice the pause. When you're triggered, pause when you want to prove. Pause when your ego flares. Pause. That pause is your shield. It's your reset button, and with time, it becomes your natural response. Calm under fire. Finally, protect your solitude. Make space not just to do, but to think, journal, reflect, create rituals of stillness. You're not just building a life, you're building a mind, and that mind becomes your greatest weapon. Because sovereignty isn't about being untouchable, it's about being unmoved. The world can swirl, people can misunderstand you, life can test you, but your center, unshaken. Detachment, solitude, clarity. This is not a trend, it's not a hack, it's a foundation. Quiet, rare, but unbreakable. And in a world of noise, the one who owns his silence owns his power.
Number 4.
The price of authenticity. There's a moment, often quiet, when you decide to stop pretending. You say less, you stop over-explaining, you begin to walk, speak, and think differently, and almost immediately people notice. They say, "You've changed." What they mean is, you've stopped making yourself smaller for their comfort. That's the start of authenticity, and it comes with a cost. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote, "A man who wishes to profess goodness at all times will come to ruin among so many who are not good." In modern terms, if you insist on being real in a world built on masks, you will face rejection. Because most people don't seek truth, they seek comfort. And when your presence disrupts that, they don't see clarity, they see arrogance, distance, a threat. The Stoics saw the same. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it." But when you start living honestly, without adjusting your tone to stay likable, you will be judged, not for being wrong, but for being clear, and clarity makes people uncomfortable. It exposes what they've hidden, even from themselves. It starts small. You stop laughing at jokes that aren't funny. You stop nodding to keep peace. You don't sugarcoat your words, and suddenly people pull back. Not because you're harsh, but because you're awake. And in a world lulled by false harmony, that alertness is disturbing. Let's be honest. It feels lonely, especially at first. When you choose authenticity, you lose proximity. You lose relationships built on convenience, not alignment. It hurts, but it's a necessary shedding because the path of sovereignty narrows. The higher you go, the fewer people breathe at that altitude. Think of David Bowie. He reinvented himself constantly, refusing to stay inside any one version of himself. Fans misunderstood him, critics mocked him, but he kept evolving. "I don't know where I'm going, but I promise it won't be boring," he said. He paid with misunderstanding, but what he gained was freedom. Or look at Keanu Reeves, rarely seen explaining himself. Calm, private, thoughtful. Some call him strange or too quiet, but those who understand see it clearly. He lives by internal rules, not noise, not approval. And that calm, that detachment, It's the result of a man who has paid the price of being misunderstood, but kept walking. The Stoics would call this strength, Epictetus said. If you want to be a writer, write. If you want to be authentic, live it. No apologies, no performance. Authenticity filters out the inauthentic. It strips away illusions and forces you to rebuild. Not from popularity, but from principle. Here's the reward. The more real you are, the more peace you feel. You stop rehearsing every conversation. You stop caring how you're perceived. You begin to trust your silence, your presence, your inner compass. You stop dancing to music you don't even like. You're not even in the room anymore. But there's always temptation to explain yourself, to soften the truth, to prove you're still good. But the second you water down your authenticity to make it easier to swallow, you lose its power. People don't need you to explain who you are. They need you to live it, quietly, unshakably. That doesn't mean rigidity. The Stoics weren't statues, they were warm, but disciplined, Seneca wrote. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Friction doesn't mean hostility, it means growth. And authenticity brings friction, not to harm, but to reveal what doesn't fit anymore. This is why most people give it up. They begin the journey, it hurts, and they return to performance. But that return is not safety, it's death. Not physical, but spiritual. Every time you fake a smile, laugh at what you don't believe in, or suppress what's true, you disappear, one small act at a time, until you wake up and wonder where you went. So how do you stay rooted? First, accept the loneliness. It's not a flaw, it's a filter. The people who fall away, they were never aligned. Let them go. The space they leave, that's your peace returning. Second, protect your standards. Don't argue for them. Don't explain them. Live them. Your peace matters more than their comfort. Your integrity matters more than their approval. Third, know the difference between coldness and containment. You're not harsh for protecting your energy. You're not arrogant for withdrawing from shallow circles. True authenticity doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be consistent. And finally, allow yourself to evolve. Don't let people hold you hostage to an old version of yourself. Authenticity is not a frozen identity. It's a living alignment with your deepest truth. And that truth will shift as you grow. Let it. Because here's the paradox. The more real you become, the fewer people will understand you. But the more valuable you'll be to those who do. You'll lose numbers, but you'll gain depth. You'll stop attracting crowds and start attracting allies, the kind who walk with you, not because they want something, but because they see you clearly, quietly, fully. That's the trade: misunderstanding, distance, silence. But in return, you gain yourself completely. And as Marcus Aurelius said, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do, that is the reward of authenticity, and it is worth every step of the path.
Number 5.
The ultimate power. So what does all of this lead to? If detachment, solitude, and clarity form the structure, and if authenticity is the cost, what do you gain in the end? The answer is simple, but rarely understood. The ultimate power is not being liked. It is not being feared. It is being free, truly free, from the opinions, the applause, and the rejection of others. It is a quiet mastery over the only thing that was ever yours to control, your inner world. In a world obsessed with visibility, those who move in silence are often dismissed. But understand this: silence is not absence. It is presence without performance. The Stoics called this apatheia, a state of serene immunity to external disturbance, not numbness, but control. You feel everything, but you're no longer ruled by it. Now let's be honest. Most people don't want power. They want permission. Permission to be seen, to be accepted, to be celebrated. They chase followers, likes, approval, but all of that is counterfeit currency. As Seneca said, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. You can have 1,000,000 eyes on you and still be empty inside. Why? Because your peace still belongs to them. True power is the opposite. It's not about how many people follow you. It's about how few can influence you. That doesn't mean you become cold or disconnected. It means your identity is no longer for sale. Your energy is no longer up for negotiation. You no longer shapeshift to keep people comfortable. You speak with restraint. You act with intention. And you let silence speak louder than noise. Look at someone like Rick Rubin. He's produced music for legends, from Johnny Cash to Kanye West. Yet he rarely speaks in public. He doesn't post. He doesn't perform. He builds in silence, in solitude. And from that stillness, world-changing creativity emerges. He once said, "The less you do, the more powerful you become." That's not laziness. That's alignment. That's presence without performance. Or consider Marcus Aurelius himself, perhaps the clearest example of silent power. He ruled the most powerful empire of his time, yet left behind not a boastful memoir, but a private journal. In it, he reminds himself, not others, how to live. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That is the essence of power. It's not external control, it's internal command. And what happens when you stop needing to be understood? You become unpredictable, not erratic, but unshakable. People can't manipulate someone who doesn't crave validation. They can't pressure someone who doesn't rush to please. They can't seduce someone who isn't hungry for applause. That kind of presence, it's unsettling, it's magnetic, it's untouchable. The Stoic doesn't seek control over others. He seeks control over his own responses, over his time, his focus, his values. And in doing so, he becomes the calmest person in the room. Not because life is easy, but because he refuses to be ruled by every gust of emotion or whisper of judgment. And the power of indifference, it's not apathy, it's elevation. When people talk about you, you observe. When they withdraw, you stay still. When they praise you, you don't rise. When they insult you, you don't fall. You remain anchored, present, clear. That emotional consistency, that's rare. And it's what makes you powerful. But this kind of power is invisible. There are no medals, no applause, no audience. And that's the point. You stop performing, you stop chasing, you become. You become someone who doesn't need to post every victory, someone who doesn't explain every silence, someone who is content to be misunderstood, because you've learned that clarity with yourself is worth more than connection with the wrong crowd. This is what James Clear meant when he said, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems, your internal system, how you think, how you decide, how you respond. That's your real kingdom. That's the only place you must rule." So how do you cultivate this kind of power? Start by letting go of the need to be seen. The most potent energy is quiet. The most influential person is rarely the loudest. Choose discipline over display. Choose restraint over reaction. Let people talk. Let them doubt. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to show every move. Power is not improving, it's in preserving. Then own your solitude, not as exile, but as elevation. The person who is never alone is never unfiltered. If your thoughts always echo the crowd, your soul has gone silent. Return to yourself. Carve out stillness, and in that space rebuild your focus. Finally, commit to clarity. Every day ask, what is mine to control? What is noise? What matters? Let these questions become your compass, because the more clear you are, the less influence others have over you. The less confused you are, the more dangerous your presence becomes, not in a destructive way, but in a sovereign one. Because the man who no longer seeks to be liked or feared, but simply lives by principle, he is untouchable. And that kind of power, it can't be stolen, it can't be manipulated, it can only be earned alone, in silence. As Epictetus once said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And once you taste that freedom, true internal freedom, you'll stop playing every game that once consumed you. This is the final step. Not visibility, not dominance, but peace, power, presence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself, because it simply is. You don't need the world to understand you to walk in power. You just need to understand yourself. And protect that understanding like your life depends on it. Because in a way, it does. The more you anchor yourself in clarity, the less you'll be pulled by noise. The more silence you master, the less chaos can reach you. You're not here to be celebrated by the crowd. You're here to walk your own path with precision, depth, and restraint. And if this message spoke to you, if you're tired of noise and ready to reclaim your sovereignty, subscribe to the channel. We build quiet strength here, not for show, but for survival, not for attention, but for alignment. Because one day, when the noise fades and the lights go out, all that will remain is who you became in silence. Make sure that version of you is someone you deeply respect,